This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Listen up and welcome back to another episode of the Tapped In Sales Podcast, your podcast for beer distributors by beer distributors. And today, boys, we are going to do our best to do some hard-hitting journalistic news. We'll see how far we get into this, as this is fairly risky. We'll have to see how many people call us out on how wrong we are on some of this. But Journalism Bud is going to get the best of everybody today and see how is Moneyball Ross and Data Mike doing today, boys.
Good. And it doesn't matter if it's good news or bad news, as long as it gets engagement, right?
That's the idea. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while. So this is a little, Mike and I have talked about this episode for a hot minute, and it just finally got on my radar where I could spend a little bit of time at a computer, do a little bit of research, and actually put an outline together. So we'll see how strong or how good or how well received it is today. TBD. Ross is not very confident in it, but that's okay.
I just want to see what happens next.
I just want to see what happens next.
I love it. That big of a deal. I'd like to hear some distributor feedback on today's topic too, and what their thoughts are.
So today's topic is, we're going to call it the $1 billion beer truck, and how the beer network has built empires and got cut out and what that means. So a lot of this is going to be a journalistic news look back related to all the NA brands where beer distributors have built the brand. It's ridden on their trucks for quite some time, grew it, and then basically got cut out. So I did work with our friends over at MBWA to grab this is a little image around all the different brands that have gone through the beer network and then were purchased in some way, shape, or form by one of the big CSD markets or marketers being Coke and Pepsi, for the most part, those two, and then were terminated out of their agreement in one way, shape, or form. As of recently, KDP has been more into the mix. That's Keurig Dr. Pepper, for those of us not keeping track at home on the shorthand, which I don't expect you to. And what this means, and really, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is bring up a historical reference of how many brands this has happened to in the beer network, we're going through the latest evolution of this, right? Where you'll see in the timelines as we get through this episode today, that this kind of goes and starts and stops or spurts and all happens at once. And this is our really kind of like second time through it happening all at once. So we'll see if people want to take away what my learnings are, and Ross, at the end, you'll kind of help come up with some interesting ideas, I'm sure, too, with your finance mind. So let's follow the money and get back to where this all sparked my interest is in the most recent stuff. But then are you familiar with the Quaker Oats buyout of Snapple back in the day, too? It was been in the mid-90s.
No, I think that was before my time.
Mm-hmm. Before mine. So under the cap, right? The note under the cap, was that the deal?
Something like that. So what was hilarious is that Quaker Oats buys Snapple for $1.7 billion. This is the first version where it was really built on the back of a beer truck. Then gets moved into their network, shifted away from independent DSD like beer distributors, and then resold in 1997 for $300 million. I think it got sold. Let's look at our notes here. It got sold to Pepsi then. And what's hilarious about this, Ross, is that one of the things that they did was that they changed their distribution model and they fired the face of the brand, who was making $100,000 a year and would read notes from customers on as their commercials. And she's this cute older woman. She was the face of the brand, and they canned her, and then the brand just took a nosedive. So they cost themselves $1.4 billion, which that was a lot of money in the mid-90s. The money, $1 billion floating around today is a lot of money too, but that's even more money in the mid-90s.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is where that all got kicked off and kind of got started. Now, the second and third and fourth iterations of this have gotten better. So the ones that we've been more accustomed to is vitamin water getting full acquisition by Coca-Cola. That happened in 2007. That was a $4.1 billion acquisition, a really big number as well, where everything got pulled in-house to Coke. Then in 2007 as well, we had Fuse get bought by Coca-Cola, which I think, if I remember right, Fuse was part of Full Throttle potentially, or that was one of the brands they had, and absorbed that into. Then from 2007 to 2011, this is where NOS got brought in as well. That was kind of connected to the Full Throttle deal. Pulled out. They weren't in a ton of beer distributor markets, but they were in a fair amount of beer distributor markets. And all the while this was happening, Mike, this is when the AB network created their relationship in like 2007, 2008, where AB created the partnership with Monster to bring Monster Energy over to the AB footprint. So Coke was zigging, AB and Monster were zagging. Pepsi really wasn't doing much in the energy drink space yet. But then that fast forwards from 2007 to 2015, where Monster buys Coca-Cola and doesn't buy Coca-Cola. It really buys a partial stake, 16.7% for $2.15 billion, which is a huge number just for that little bit. But as part of that, there's like a trade inside the trade. All of the AB and beer distributors got terminated, and Coca-Cola became the Monster distributor of choice across the network. They're bottlers, independent, and wholly owned. And Coca-Cola was like, we're not particularly strong at this energy drink game. We make sugary water, not energy drink water. So let's move all of those energy drink brands over to the Monster brand. And Hansen Natural, which was the non-energy brand, then moved to Coca-Cola. So they did some brand swaps. They did the equity stake and the acquisition. But Monster stayed a wholly owned, publicly traded company. There was a first experiment of that kind. Everything else had been a full acquisition of the brand rights and or licensing in some way. Then we took a couple years off. Core Water got picked up by Keurig Dr. Pepper. That had some hybrid network. We moved into the KDP network. Some beer distributors are also KDP, so some people just, they kept it in their house and then moved. Then in 2020, a lot of stuff kicks up again. Rockstar and Pepsi, 3.85, where the Rockstar footprint included many beer distributors. That got moved over, and all of the got transferred into Pepsi's network. Then we had Bang Energy partner with Pepsi. This wasn't an acquisition. This was a distribution partnership where Bang terminated all of their distributors and moved all of those brand rights over to Pepsi. That won't take very long because like fast forward 18 months later, 24 months later, Bang terminates Pepsi in sheer absolute splendor and chaos, moves back, runs right back to many of its legacy beer distributors that they were working with, where they do take the brand back. Quickly goes into bankruptcy shortly after that. Monster goes to work, takes Bang out and buys Bang for, well, actually doesn't. I think they do the asset purchase. They're the only reasonable person to purchase the assets for $362 million and just buries the brand.
Well, that was all due to the lawsuit too. Which
Exactly.
Ross, did you do any research on what super creatine is?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
You won't find any supporting articles on it because that was what the lawsuit was all over. Bang, alleges that they're using super creatine, and Monster basically said there is no such thing as super creatine.
Just creatine.
We will sue you for more than what the brand is worth. Take the brand, bury the brand, and move on with Monster.
Yep. Just bye-bye. So cleans house, gets that done. I mean, you got to love the bankruptcy court judge or the bankruptcy magistrate being like, you know what, we're going to let this $362 million deal go through, even though we know the brand isn't going to go anywhere because they're the best suitor. Nobody else can choose to afford to pay enough or as much as they can. And we're going to get as much credit or money back as we can. A couple more deals. We're coming towards more real time. Just a couple years ago, then C4 Energy get picked up by KDP. They terminate all of the beer distribution network as well. and then Celsius to PepsiCo. This is going to be another second 2.0 version of what Monster did, where there's a partial stake of 8.5% for PepsiCo buying Celsius for $55 million. This was the, hey, Bang's out the door. We're going to get rid of this wildcat and move into Pepsi more, or move into Celsius, more organized, more adults in the room. And then they did some brand swaps back and forth around two, where Celsius is going to manage all of the energy drink brands that PepsiCo had, and PepsiCo is going to actually do all the distribution for everything, basically the duplication, the working document of what Monster and Coca-Cola did. Then we've got Ghost Energy, gets picked up by, well, they create the relationship with Anheuser-Busch first, launch the brand on the RTD side for the ready-to-drink energy drinks, launch that. When did that happen, Mikey? Like early was that like 2000 and 2020, 21?
Yeah, I couldn't put a date on it.
I think it was 2021. AB announces the relationship with Ghost Energy. They come out with the RTD drinks and hit the shelves. Goes really, really well with very little support. KDP announces a 60% acquisition for about $1.6 billion, terminates all of the beer distributors, moves it over their KDP network. Then Alani Nu gets an opportunity to get bought by Celsius. And there's some mixed signals on whether like PepsiCo is driving the bus and doing a good job at distribution of Celsius. And if that was the reason why Alani Nu got picked up by Celsius, because they wanted to become a bigger player or a bigger footprint in some way, shape, or form. But Celsius buys Alani Nu. At the end of the day, that gets folded in from Congo Brands, also the makers of Prime Energy, or no, not Prime Energy, Prime Water or Prime Drink, whatever we call that as well. And then Alani terminates all of its beer distributors. That is still ongoing or slowly winding down right now. Then we've got Poppi getting picked up by PepsiCo, $1.95 billion. That's going to get terminated. All the beer distributors as well. That was fairly exclusively sold through DSD Network too. And then that Rockstar, like we said, it was owned by Pepsi, then got moved to Celsius. And the final nail in the coffin, or the final piece here, when 2028, as part of the Ghost KDP deal, PepsiCo is going to buy, or no, KDP is going to buy the rest of the remaining stake of Ghost based on an earnout valuation and financial performance for 2027 as well. So that is a long list of various brands. I mean, Mikey and Ross, that is all, and this isn't, I don't even think the whole list, but that is quite a list of brands that have been traded hands, terminated, and moved around the network in a big way, right?
Yeah, and I mean, sad, but that's not going to be the complete list. You know it won't. And we think about this in the topic of building billion-dollar brands. I mean, it blows my mind how invisible the beer network is to the average person, right? The average person on the street, but how essential it is for building these billion-dollar brands. It really is. And it's like the beer network is the unofficial Shark Tank, right? We test it, we build it, we scale it, and as soon as Wall Street notices, the big cola companies swoop in and write a giant check. And honestly, I mean, people never talk about it. It is the distributors put all the risk on them. I mean, they have so much risk early on, right? We're the ones walking into the account saying, "Hey, trust me, try this. Let's try it." And we're the people on the streets really building the brands before Pepsi and Coke even know the brand exists. But I mean, and it's also, I think it's really important and fair to say too, don't let this discourage you. When new products and new brands come our way, it's essential to really still take risks and move and grab new products. And don't let the pain of the past really hold you back, because there's a lot of upside for our industry, and it's real, right? We build value, and that's proof. Every time one of these brands comes through our network, from nothing to a billion-dollar brand, we're proving that we build value. And in the meantime, it's not a cost center. We're not doing somebody a favor, right? It's a real revenue engine for us too. So still continuing to pick up new brands. I don't want this whole topic to really discourage people like, I'm done. I'm not taking a risk anymore. I'm not picking up any more NA. I mean, there's still some real money to be made too. And it just proves how important and how good we are at our jobs.
Mm-hmm. The other piece of why this has been super successful for the beer industry too, and Ross, you'll have a take on this, is that all of these products, for the most part, are incredibly powerful in the C-store channel, which is right where beer distributors do incredibly well, both AB and Molson Coors, or anybody does. So even some of the newest beverage alcohol game in RTDs do better in C-stores than they do in grocery. If energy drink was a grocery game and that was where it was won or lost, these brands would have never come into our network, but it's won and lost in the C-store channel. So the value is really your route to market in that channel as a beer distributor. And how do you own those cooler shelves, or how do you own those boxes, right, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of directions I can go here. Going back to what I said on last week's podcast, which was, in a perfectly competitive world, the 3-tier system would not exist. But because of the way our industry is structured, it does. And inadvertently, it's created a channel to market that is vastly different than the way general business in our society works today, right? General business is a reflection of society as a whole, which is very high time preference, which is, I got to do things now, right? I got a YOLO in the market. I have to, change jobs every 3 months. I mean, our entire society is built around this idea of high time preference. And as these businesses are coming into play, they're just a reflection of the world we live in, which is, I'm going to spin up a business, YOLO it, grow it fast, sell it off, right? Nobody's creating a business say, I want to create the next Coca-Cola to last 200 years. Nobody's doing that. But counter that is the 3-tier beer system, or beverage alcohol system, which is very low time preference. It's family businesses or small conglomerations of business that are generally privately held, that are long-term focused, right? They're not thinking about next quarter. They ain't even thinking about next year. They're thinking about next decade, right? And that's reflective of how they go to, how they approach politics, how they approach the market. It's how they approach relationships with the retail, right? I'm going to see you next week. I'm going to see you next quarter. I'm going to see you next year. And we're going to see you in 10 years, right? It's going to be the same trucks, same shirt that I'm going to be wearing, or whoever's going to be replacing me. The guy that was merchandising you is going to be here next year. It's a very different culture than the overall culture in the times we live in. And if you're building a brand, you want to be, the optimal place to be is high time preference brand building, but building your brand in a low time preference distributor. And that's exactly where you want to be. And that's exactly where you benefit, because brand building happens with relationships. And quite frankly, that's a low preference activity, which is nurturing a relationship, fostering respect and trust over time. And you get that in a 3-tier system, right? And that's also why you say C-store is that way, right? Because you're still seeing that buyer face to face, and he still has decision-making capability. I would argue it's the same on the on-premise. Now, you look at something like Walmart and the big chains, they're very much a reflective of the world we live in today, which is just move the product from A to B, right? And then blast Facebook marketing, whatever. And it's just A to B. It's not brand building. It's not boots on the street, relationship driven, which quite frankly is a reflection of a world that we used to live in, but is very relevant today if you want to build a brand.
Yeah. If we do ourselves a disservice of not thinking about how well the industry does in the channels and how it builds the businesses. And we've kind of said we are not brand builders anymore. I would argue that we are brand builders, just in different ways, and might be in different market segments than what we have in the past. And like brand building for classic beverage alcohol in the on-premise, yeah, maybe we've lost our way a little bit here and there, but definitely haven't lost our way in C-stores. And definitely haven't lost our way in the energy drink. If anything, we found our legs in a lot of different ways based on all the success and results that we've had here. So if you're a supplier out there listening to this and you're like, man, I want to build the next $1 billion brand, this is what I've said before. Well, all three of us have some way, shape, or form. And like, the way to do that is to partner with these beer distributors. They're willing to take your brands on. They're willing to find these routes to markets. They're willing to, invest in the ways. And think about all the stuff that we did with Monster, Mike, and firsthand with Ghost on both of those brands. You had no network support, no supplier support. I mean, Monster had one dude run the whole state of Michigan, didn't have any district managers or any middle management support. He was just like flying by the seat of his pants. We maybe see him like twice a year, maybe. And like, we did all the work. We grew the business one by one. Ghost didn't have anybody.
No,
and like, that they didn't know what a brand manager was.
Yeah.
Like, and we did all this work. And the thing that rubs me the wrong way is
Preach,
we
bud.
aren't
Preach it.
we aren't doing a good job of negotiating our termination fees or our
Yeah.
out clauses. Like, that's the takeaway, is how are we advocating for these termination clauses the right way when they're on the way out? Because we know we're going to continue to build these brands, to Mike's point. We're in a position now where beverage alcohol is struggling to the point where you have to add value to the truck in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through boxes on volume driven or profitability, which these things are very profitable typically too on a case by case basis. So you have to protect yourself from, if you're going to make this investment, how do you make this investment and how do you advocate for this on the back end? Right, boys?
Yeah, I think that, whether you say play the ball on the field, or, as live in the times you live in, which is, you need to realize that this is a transaction that's different than your
beer relationship.
In the beer relationship, and you're still stuck in that old world mentality that I have a relationship with you, you have a relationship with me, we're going to be long-term partners. We're families in business together, and we're going to grow this together. And there's high trust, and that's not what you're dealing with here. You need to realize you're dealing with basically, high time preference, startup, sell mentality, which is fine. You just need to make sure you're aligned with that goal. And I think that's how you deal with it, bud. It's the same way that, wholesalers have had to adapt to the fact that, when you're dealing with Walmart, you don't send in your best sales rep to, build the relationship. It's just a waste of your effort, and you've had to adapt to it. You got to live in the times you live in, and you got to deal with the market and the relationships as they are. And I think we've been a little slow to adapt to that, and that's a charm. It's a charming aspect of our industry, and we certainly don't want to lose it. But at the same time, is we do need to live in the times we live in.
It's not a bad thing. You're right. It's not a detrimental look at the industry. It's just what it is. But it's a good comparison, Ross, of the way we've chosen to start to work with retailers like Walmart, and you've adjusted to like super merchandisers or more merchandiser centric rather than your top performing sales rep. That's a great way. And it has taken the industry quite some time to move in that direction. And that's a good way of comparison to, put it back in there in that camp. On the supplier centric side too, I wanted to pick on like two things, like, and it's interesting to me that like Monster and Celsius have chosen to take the path of an investment and for a minority or a portion of the business rather than a full wholesale sale. Do you think that, boys, is more related to the entrepreneurs that are running those businesses, or do you think it's more of the function of that this is where they saw a long-term vision and they did want to build the next Coca-Cola that would outlast them or outlast the founder or the small group that started the organization?
I'll let Ross take this one.
Okay. I was going to give you a chance to talk. I feel like I've talked a lot here.
No, I want to hear your insight on this one.
I think that
as our in-house economist, I want to hear your perspective.
I mean, I genuinely feel that a lot of these founders probably drink the Kool-Aid, which is, now that I'm a big boy brand, I belong with the big boy. And they generally believe that if they hold on to the equity, they're going to ride the upside. If it were me, knowing what I know, I'd sell it all, walk away, because they're going to destroy your brand. It's going to get lost and it's going to get destroyed and it's gone. But you looked at it and said, you took for granted that these wholesalers built your business, and you think it was all you, and you tell yourselves this narrative, and like, now I'm ready to graduate to the big leagues. I'm here to play now, and I want to retain equity because I got this whole upside coming, because we're going to grow. And I'm looking at the metrics. I'm like, well, if I get to 10% of what Coca-Cola's sales are, wow, right? And I'd rather take the equity upside, and then versus maybe an earn out or a full payout, right? But if it was me, just take the cash and run, because that's your optimal play. Which brings us back to what you should do as your optimal play as a distributor, which I think you laid out pretty well, Butter. You could probably spend some more time laying it out, but I suspect that these founders and their boards and their investors believe that it's time to graduate to the big league.
Mikey, you've got some good perspectives on like this and what you see in the field once we've done these transactions and how performance has actually taken place with the new acquisition wholesaler network. Like, what's your read on the street? Because you've had lots of strong opinions about this and have seen firsthand pros and cons of making the move from our vantage point as wholesalers.
Yeah, I think what a lot of the investors and suppliers are missing when they're making those decisions to jump over to the big guys is that, I mean, when you look at a beer distributor, we have the relationships and we have the time. If you just follow a soda rep, 100% soda rep throughout their day, they don't have the time. They're not talking to their retailers like we are. You're not asking about their day and their kids and what they did over the weekend. You're not learning about. I mean, their routes, their days are slam packed. They have hundreds of SKUs in those accounts, and for the most part, I mean, we've seen this time and time again, right? When you're thinking if you're selling your brand to the big guy, and let's look at Bang for once, because Bang was just a monster. It was a category leader for quite some time. 2-3 shelves, right?
Like 18% of the market at peak, I think. Not to, we're armchair experting some of these numbers here right now, but there's a huge, that might have been high, like 10% of the energy drink market at some point for Bang, which was hot.
Insane. They came out swinging, right? I mean, they had so many influencers on Instagram. I remember going up to you and going, "Hey, you need to find this product, and we need to get it in house." And you go, I messaged them last week, and we were talking about that. But that's a prime example of if you can't beat them, delete them. And what Monster did was delete them, basically, right? So, and when you're thinking about your brand, and if you're going to hold on to some equity, and some of these bigger companies are absorbing your brand, are they just buying you to delete you from competition? And if so, take that buyout and run and get the hell out of there while you can before there is no equity left in your brand. Because, I mean, it's happening every day, right? We see it all the time. But I think what, to Bud's question, it really comes back to what we see on the streets with those relationships. Relationships sell products. We also have the time, and in most cases, we have the time to pay attention to that category because, we have 90% of our focus on our beer doors. And then now, hey, I have some soda products and some energy products. Like now I want to win in those categories too, but I only have 2 or 3. I don't have 50. Right. So now I'm like, all right, I want to make sure that I'm winning here. I'm having those conversations. And how many times have we watched a great brand grow from the bottom shelf? Right. We did it with Ghost. You walk into an account, nobody wants to be on the bottom shelf and a door with no energy in it. Guess what? We got it. And we built that brand from the bottom, no pun intended, from the bottom up. Right. And I think that's what it really comes back to is what are we trying to achieve here? Do we want to see our brand grow and be successful? And we really got to take a second look at where we're going, because even with Monster, just the execution when Monster was bought out by Coke or went over to Coke, we've seen it time and time again with so many brands. The execution just really goes downhill.
I think Mike, you pointed to a good piece there, which is if you're a supplier looking to sell, you need to step back and ask, what are the incentives of the acquirer? And it's similar to the tech space. I mean, a lot of times these tech acquisitions are to destroy potential future competition. I'd rather buy you now and put you under, absorb the talent into my business, than deal with you as a bigger competitor later. So I think you need to be aware of that. Their motivations may not be what they're selling you, which is the idea that they're going to turn you into the big leagues, and maybe just to take you out because you're taking shelf space, and then you're pissing them off. It's cheaper for them just to buy you and make you go away.
Mm-hmm.
Quick fact check on the fly. Bang Energy reached 10% of the energy drink market before it whittled down to less than 2 on its way to bankruptcy. So and the rocket ship was up to the moon and then rolled over on its back and went right back down to the bottom as well.
And Mikey, whose space were you taking when Bang was growing? Primarily, whose space were you taking?
Bang's a bad example because we kind of got that at its height when it was peaking.
We did.
We acquired it when it was at its peak. So, but when like Ghost, even Monster, when we just get it into the door, doesn't matter. Just get us into the NA door. We'll find a way to sell this product. And then when it starts selling and they see, the kind of support that they get from us, Spice came from anywhere, either the lowest performing non-contract energy drink that was in the door. A lot of those doors are pay to play. So we have contracts out there, right? Coke and Pepsi. But then there's usually an all other door where it's all other non-contracted NAs and playing in there. But yeah, it just all depends on the account where the space actually came from. Never from beer. Never from beer.
The other piece for Monster, just to pick on Monster, because Monster was that case study, right? Let's sell a portion of the company for evaluation. They were also publicly traded when that happened. So a little bit different than a privately held brand acquisition, kind of like what a lot of the other brands that we've talked about are. Celsius also publicly traded. So these are two case studies that are unique in that the energy drink acquired brand or partnered brand was already publicly traded. But Monster just had their biggest quarter yet, growing to 2.2 billion in net sales. That's a 16.8% growth, but to your year over year for total Q3. But what's fascinating to me about this, Mike, we don't have as strong of execution, is that the US and Canada growth was 12% versus the 16.8 total growth. So that was an additional, delta growth, Ross, of 4.8%, just driving higher from all the incremental international growth. So that meant international grew considerably faster compared to the US and Canada business, and US Canada business, more mature market for the business or for Monster Energy drink as well, but that's growing. So they're the one unique case study from what I've been able to tell that has actually continued to accelerate sales. And I'm going to give you the floor one more time, Mikey, to when we got terminated out of Celsius and you talked about it's all fake sales or it's all net new, but then doesn't really stick the next year over year around. Walk people through your mindset on that when you see this execution happen in the trade, or where you see execution pop and then kind of dwindle back down.
Yeah, we see it just extracted from the raw data when brand looks like it's on fire, or a category. Let's use the RTD category too as a great example. When we see the data just going through the roof on Celsius, and it's like, oh man, this brand's on fire. Well, guess what? We're either filling up full doors that we're getting because the brand is accelerating, right? Or we're getting more shelf space, and we're going in and the brand was growing, so we're getting more space. So how much of that was actually flushing through the account, through the register? Probably maybe 50%, 75% of that actual growth, right? And I like to relate it back to the RTDs when those went crazy, right? We have High Noon hitting, and it's just not slowing down. No signs of decline. And then we go into the next reset season, and some of our larger chains, larger supermarkets are bringing it in, all the RTDs, right? Because we saw after that first year, 2 years of High Noon just going through the roof, we absolute, we everybody was jumping on board. Crown and everybody had an RTD. So then all the big supermarkets are saying, yeah, well, we need more space. We need more space. And going back to last week's episode, probably coming from craft, right, and premium. But then, so now we're out here filling all these chain mandates, and obviously we're selling more product in, and it's not selling through. So now in the data, I always call that artificial sales growth, because the data looks like the brand and the category is on fire when all we're doing is selling it in. Nobody has even sold it through yet. And I remember doing a reset at Meijer, one of our bigger grocery stores, and they took a 4-foot section, made it all RTDs, all the big names that still to this day are probably sitting there. And then they took an 8-foot section of warm space, and it was all RTDs. Well, that bottom shelf and the warm shelf,
the holding power was insane,
right? I mean, it's supposed to be for premium beer, so you can get 7 cans high and 3 deep. So then here are all these RTD companies, and I won't call out any of the distributors, filling that space to the brim. And I remember just going, holy shit, this is insane. They're never going to sell this, A. But B, Meijer is probably going to look at their numbers and be like, what the hell? Why do we have so much inventory? And the distributor's looking at their numbers going, holy shit, this stuff's on fire. Let's order more. And the supplier is just, having a great celebration and popping champagne and like, we're selling so much product. Well, hey, guess what? It's just sitting there. We just sold it in. Artificial sale growth.
Maybe Bud pull up like an S curve for the audience to see. But I think that mirroring what Mike's saying from a data perspective, it goes back to we have a chicken and egg game problem in our industry, and in the industry, the market as a whole, which is this idea that scan data begets placements, which begets scan data. So it's like a self-reinforcing, exponentially growing function, right? which you see it play out across, each of these things as they come along, whether it's the NA beers or whether it's these energy drinks. I'll just say that let's say, for example, that we in the 3-tier system, we build the brand and it kind of starts doing this, then you start getting some scan data, cool, and then you get more scan data, which then hits that exponential curve. So I think that that tells the story of what Mike's saying, and then eventually you explode and you burn out and you come down. So maybe it's more like a boom bust cycle, but we have this issue where chains are laser focused on scan data. And the more chains that bring it in, the better the scan data gets. So then the more chains that bring it in, the more space, which makes more scan data. And then to Mike's point, everybody's getting behind it, everybody's flying, which then leads into this high preference society of like, well, cool, my brand's on the S curve. My private equity backers are looking at this saying, okay, I know where we are on this S curve, sell it, dump it, right?
Yeah, get rid of it now.
Get rid of it now before we hit the, boom and bust, or the curve flattens out. And valuations are based on future projected, price to earnings growth. And if you're on the middle of the S curve, you're never going to look more valuable.
This is a better curve you were looking for, right, Ross?
That's the one.
Yeah. So start, grow, scale, mature, and then you kind of have to repeat these cycles over and over again. Or is it going to mature and go down? Is it going to mature and stay flat? Is it going to, or are you actually go back up into growth mode? Because you can continue to repeat your growth mode, right, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, usually it burns out. I mean, because the market saturates.
At some point,
I mean, the market's always so big. But going back to that chart real quick, I mean, where you want to, the optimal place to sell is that second point when you're on the steepest part of the S curve. That's your optimal point to get out.
Somewhere right in here.
Yep, that's where you want to get out.
Yep. And when you look at some of these sales data, like that's why they're looking to get in or manage this in some way, shape, or form, like when my timing is. The timing is a lot of stuff related to it. So if you're a supplier listening to this, you can, and I want to get rich quick, you can see how you can do that related to beer distributors.
Go take advantage of your local beer distributor.
If you see it, as long as they're giving out handouts, you might as well. You can go find those opportunities to leverage into it. I mean, they're looking for, it's not like we're not getting nothing out of it. We are getting the profitability, but the lesson from the distributor back end is, or the takeaway is like, yes, you're winning and getting some profitability on the front end, but what are you doing to protect yourself so that you can capture some value off of this equity growth in some way, shape, or form, either through a termination fee or some warrants or some making an investment into a brand as well too, because these are startup brands that might need capital or are looking for capital one way. So one of the things I wanted to pitch you, Ross, is a new way or a new model. And I don't even know how you would do it. I think you might have an opinion about it, but it seems like the market is really hard to wrestle with anything north of like a 2 or 3x termination fee. And the reason why is that these termination numbers can get really big as part of an acquisition when that happens. I mean, just Monster alone publicly said that their termination fees were somewhere around $206 million when they did the termination. And Alani News, I think, is thrown out almost that. New. Let's go see what this says. See if we can actually. Actually bigger. Looking at about 246 million in termination fees. So that's an expense, right? Like the supplier or the acquisition party looks at that and as an expense and an investment in some way, shape, or form to get the brand. Now, if growth continues at 30 or 40% or 50%, then that doesn't really matter on that curve. But if it plateaus or if it's not growing that much, this is a big drag. So is there a way, Ross, for a distributor, should they be thinking about actually buying in and buying equity stakes in some way, shape, or form? Should the suppliers think about carving out warrants for distributor partners or a pool of funds or a pool of shares for distributors as a termination fee in lieu of actual termination fees? Or do you think that's just too crazy, too complicated, bud?
Yeah, well, also it's a very disparate network. You'd have to have some kind of organization across the distributors to make some kind of effort.
It had to be run by the supplier. I mean, if you're going to do warrants or something like that, it'd have to be a supplier-led
But why give them if your distributors aren't asking for them? And I think the other thing too is that will it change the performance? I think what's wild to me is that we continuously look at this as a multiple of revenue, or as the valuation.
Usually multiple of GP.
Yeah, sorry, multiple of GP. That's what I meant. When everything else in valuation is price to earnings growth, you're missing the growth variable, right? And 3 times revenue sounds really bad if you're on a 200% growth trajectory. So I don't know. I mean, my quick thinking is if I'm sitting there, I'm doing some kind of calculation that also involves growth, whatever the growth rate is at point of sale. Because again, know who you're dealing with. If their play is to sell on the optimal part of the S curve, and we keep to see it over and over and over again, because they're acting like they're tech companies or private equity startups, then know who you're talking to. And if they're going to sell on the optimal part of the growth curve, make sure you're adjusting for what the growth rate is at the point of sale.
That'd be a good idea. So how would you do that mathematically? Like, what is that rough, loose look like? Is it a multiple of GP, so everybody can understand that, plus a growth factor on top of it in some way?
Yeah, I mean, like we had price to earnings growth multiple, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm shooting from the hip here. I'm just pulling stuff out of my ass. So, I'm just a guy.
That's what we do here on the podcast.
I'm just a guy sitting in a bedroom talking on the podcast,
That's exactly what we're supposed to do here on a podcast.
You're in the bedroom right now?
Yes, because the kids are home from school, so I'm hiding out. My back's killing me on some shitty stool at this damn rental house.
Man.
Dude, I mean, again,
house is almost done.
Dude, I was supposed to have moved in like 90 days ago.
Have they pushed back the date again yet?
Dude, no, they haven't. They don't dare.
They don't dare.
Not because of me, because my wife will kill them.
Yes, I'm sure she would. Yes, I'm sure she would.
But no, I mean, I'd have to sit down and pencil it out. But I think for me, the missing variable is not necessarily the multiple. It's not getting exotic with equity. It's accounting for what growth represents. Because I feel like they're going to, I don't feel like, I know that they're going to optimally leave on that, when their valuation is the highest. And that's usually when the growth is the highest. And you feel the most upset about it because that's when your level of work has, hit that peak of, I worked really hard and I got this brand into the point at where it's really freaking going. I pushed that boulder so far and now it's starting to roll downhill on its own. Yeah. I'm missing the downhill on its own. So then you're leaving right when I finished the hardest part of the job, which is rolling that damn boulder up the hill. So make sure when that boulder's rolling down the hill that you're compensated for the fact that it's rolling fast now.
It's a great way to put it, that when their time to exit is at the exact point in which you're starting to get the returns on your effort and your investment in the brands as a distributor. Because if you're, because we did this a ton in the industry, if we're over investing for young brands that are up and coming, that are doing more and more little by little, and we're looking for that long term, we don't necessarily have to do quarterly meetings. We don't do month-to-month financial reviews. Like, we're not super duper picky about the ebbs and flows of a budget. If we miss a budget by a few percentage points, it's not the end of the world. We don't have bankers breathing down our necks for the most part across the industry. Like, as long as grandpa and grandma, mom, dad, cousin, aunt, uncle, whatever, are still roughly getting the distribution checks that you promised them, you don't get a lot of people bugging you about how the financial performance of the organization is. And right when they're going to sell is just when your effort is starting to pay dividends.
That's right.
And that's probably what ekes me the most out of all of it. And that's probably the best way I've heard anybody describe it to me, Ross. So thank you for putting that out there and really helping the group understand that better. Because right when it starts rolling downhill and right when it starts moving fast, Celsius, Bang, Ghost, all good, even Monster, Mikey, like right when it started to get easy, right when the team started to realize how valuable it was, because we knew how valuable it was on the P&L, but right when all the sales reps started to realize how valuable it was right when it got plucked from the clutches of what we were doing.
Yes.
So that's a good way to think about it, Ross, is we needed to have a better way to value these things. We need to have a better way to value the exits in some way, shape, or form. Trying to do that with Form Energy, at least with a 5X termination rather than a 1 or 2X or 3X termination. The next round of these things that get done, it's going to be a couple of years probably, again, because we're just picking off all of the top performers right now. There's some digestion period that happens too, right? So start talking to your folks now and thinking about the brands that you're signing in now, because Coke and Pepsi have just picked off all the top performers right now. And they're going to go through a digestion period in the market where it's going to take our network to build up the next $1 billion winners. And that'll take, but judging by history repeats itself, or rhythms or rhymes and rhythms, it's going to be between 24 to probably 48 months. So you've got between now and 2027 and now and 2029 to get your contracts in the position that you want them to be in for the next cycle of this to happen.
And I would argue with your if you're negotiating with a supplier. I mean, first of all, I mean they're going to try to say, well, nobody else is talking to me like this. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been told that.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Life. But I think the sell back to the supplier is, if you're the distributor, is, well, you want me to get your brand in the highest growth position possible. So if that day were to come that you sell, I want to make sure the guy next door, he's only growing at 150. I'm growing at 4x. Because if I'm multiplying my multiple times my rate of growth, I'm going to be celebrating your sale. And I want to make sure that I've got you in the highest growth position possible when that day comes. Right? And I'd rather you get to a 400% growth rate, get an amazing valuation, and I get rewarded for the high rate of growth instead of your brand fizzling out and dying over time. I mean, you ask yourself as a supplier, where would you rather be? Would you rather get a big payout when they're on the maximum valuation? Or would you rather wait for the brand to slowly die and feeder off and disappear, like rogue?
I don't know which one I'd want after that glowing recommendation. And the numbers are big, right? So like if you're talking about, a $200 million termination fee over $1 billion plus, and a lot of times the valuation, Ross, of these things are paid off the top, and the termination fee is paid by the distribution tier. So, and by the distribution operation of Coke and Pepsi as a investment in the brand. It's not always part of the total. True, at least to me as an outsider, it doesn't look like we'll pay a $2 billion less the termination fee, and then that's what you keep. That's not the way it's designed. It's we'll pay you the $2 billion, we'll pay the termination fee distributor to distributor as the investment on top of whatever we paid you for the brand rights and the equity in the brands or licensing of the brands in some way, shape, or form. So as long as you can continue to keep that method of the madness done, why wouldn't you want to get there faster? Why wouldn't you want to have a network that's uniquely armed to grow as quickly as possible?
Again, it's completely foreign to the way we think in our network, right? When we're changing brands with our neighbor across the street, because beer brands are trading, we're doing it as gentlemen. Hey, I'm giving you this, you're giving me this. Let's align our brands. We compete with each other, but we're friendly. We see each other in MBWA. We grab dinner together. Like, you need to realize, I mean, when you're dealing with this NA world, that doesn't look like that world, and you need to approach that world and meet it where it is, and meet them where they live.
So, prediction corner. Do we think the cycle repeats itself yet again with energy, or does it switch categories in some way, shape, or form? Other categories could be more like we've seen Poppy as the first version, but there are other Poppies out there. We've also seen beer distributors pick up a lot of protein drinks. We talked about proteinification of the alcohol industry, but there's a ton of protein shakes out there that are in the non-alcohol protein space that are going with beer distributors. Or do we just see the next cycle of Lucky Energy, Bucked Up, and all the other like C, B, and D players that start to take over market share in the energy drink, and we're just going to repeat the cycle again in energy?
I think with those brands you've mentioned, I mean, with no safety net out there on the distributor side, with any kind of kickback, it's probably just going to repeat itself. And then the other thing you didn't even mention either is the Delta 9.
That was my first thought.
Out there too.
Okay. Yeah.
But it tracks exactly what you said. I mean, the incentive for these legacy companies is to kill you before you grow. And that's the strategy they took through lobbying. I mean, that's a conspiracy theory, but I mean, it's weird that it showed up the way it did, how it did.
Those are so 3 predictions: most likely energy, next likely THC, Delta 9,
and then the functional energies that Mikey's talked a lot about coming off MBWA. I think there's
functional energy.
I think there's maybe it's not even energy; it's just functional, like it's cognitive, it's
functional beverage.
Functional beverage. That category has a chance to go, and it might be the next to go.
See, I always thought that too. That I've only talked to one upstart NA supplier in the last year, and I've said microdose, mushroom, functional beverage. Like that was my like energy drinks. That's my next piece. And you look at like the gum category. This is wild that I know this or that I'm even paying attention to this, but like spearmint gum is like energy drink, right? But these functional neuro gums and the mushroom gums and the caffeine gums and the gums that are better for you out there, like you continue to see more and more marketing like that. That is going to make its way into the beverage category, even though it hasn't quite made it there all the way yet. And I'm on board with that too. So let's make that prediction then. We'll do functional beverage first. Could be laced with energy or could not. Then classic energy, then Delta 9, then the protein crew.
I would have put Delta 9 first had it not gotten slammed.
The lace. Yeah.
And I still hold out hope that that's going to be dealt with. I mean, there's just too much money at play. And those, like you said, that guy that was hustling at that party, that company's, I mean, this industry is going to have to collectivize and get its head out of the sand. They were going out there and thinking, I just could just build a business and it's legal because it's hemp. I don't have to worry about it. Well, you got to worry about it. And it's the same way Bill Gates learned in the 90s or whatever, that, unless you may not think about Washington, but Washington's thinking about you. So They need to get their head out of the their head out of their ass and get in the game. And quite frankly, and I mentioned on last week's podcast, we as a distributor industry, we got to do the same.
We got to get in the game too.
We got to get in the game.
We got to organize and be the adults in the room and design this the way that it should be designed in one way, shape, or form. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble long term. Love it. Well, good episode, boys. We covered a lot of ground this week. If you like what we're doing, continue to like, listen, and subscribe. Share with a friend. If you have comments you want to call bullcrap on anything we talked about today or any of the other podcasts, or just want to say, hey, I got a listener questions, I want you three knuckleheads to tackle this, hit us up at info@vxptech.com. That's info@vxptech.com. I'm your hostess for today, Bud, here with Moneyball Ross and Data Mike. You two rock. Thank you, boys, for coming and joining me yet again today. And cheers, crew.
Cheers.